the wonderful Russ Wilson. So let me tell you a little bit about him, and then I'll let him take the stage. Super nice guy. He is a former entrepreneur, actually founded 3 startups. He's held many executive roles. Recently, he was head of IBM's Mobile Innovation Lab. I wrote this down so I get the titles right. Mobile Innovation Lab, and head of design for IBM's largest software group. So Russ lived in Austin for 30 years. And then a company in Seattle, a little company called Microsoft, wooed him, and he moved to Seattle, where he now is an executive partner and head of design for Microsoft's suite of business intelligence products. So it is my pleasure, and I think you're going to really enjoy this, to introduce Russ Wilson.
Am I live? Hi, thanks. Can you hear me? Am I live? Oh, awesome. Okay. So thank you, Sarah. Very nice intro, and thanks everyone for coming to hear the talk. I am very fortunate to have had a very colorful career, a somewhat unusual career, and I want to share some of those experiences and the lessons I've learned from each of those experiences and how I've used them to do great design work. So we'll start in 1984 at Alston's Produce. Actually, before I start, is there anyone in the room that was not born in 1984? I hate all of you. Please leave the room now. No, don't leave. There's too many of you. Never mind. So, Alston's Produce. So I was 16 when you were 0. My family decided that I needed to learn the value of hard work. And so they had a friend who was running a produce plant in Mexico. Now, I grew up, as Sarah mentioned, down in Texas on the border of Mexico. And Bill Alston had a produce plant in Nuevo Laredo. And the agreement was that I would go for a summer job for 2 months to this produce plant, and I would have to show up at 6 a.m. in the morning, and I would be picked up at 6 p.m. It's a 12-hour workday. Now, in Nuevo Laredo, in the summer, it's about 105 on average, 110, and this produce plant was outside. And the job was to receive produce, so these big 18-wheelers would pull up, and they would be full of, cantaloupes, or onions, or tomatoes, or what have you. And we'd have to unload the crates, right? Sometimes we'd ship crates out, the other way around. And sometimes we'd sort produce. Well, about a week into it, a truck full of 40 to 50-pound bags of chili peppers breaks down about 2 blocks from the produce plant. And so my boss comes and says, I need some volunteers to go help fix the problem. The solution was they were going to get another similar truck, back it up to that truck, and a few guys would get inside and move all those chili peppers to the new truck. So the chili peppers wouldn't spoil, they could leave. So I volunteered, and somehow I wound up in the back of that truck, and the other guys didn't get in. And they backed up the other truck until there was only about a gap that big, and I had a thermos of water, and they left. They walked off. And it's about 106 degrees, and I start moving these bags of chili peppers from one side of the truck to the other side of the truck, and my eyes are swelling up because the fumes are starting to really get to me. I'm sneezing, I'm coughing, I'm wheezing, my hands are bleeding, and these guys don't come back for a long time. Finally they come back, they pull the trucks apart, I jump out, I'm all swollen, they start laughing. So I go to my boss and I say, I think these guys hate me, like, well, why did they do that? And he said, they do hate you. He said, you have to be in their shoes, you have to look at the world from their eyes. You're this white kid from the US, and you're taking away a job that's very important to them, right? And so what I took away from this experience was the importance of empathy, right? I can't overemphasize how important empathy is in the work that we do. To really, we pay lip service to it, but too often I meet people who, oh yeah, empathy, yes, it's important. Yeah, we have to have empathy. But the reality is so many people don't do it. They don't do it right. They don't really, it's very difficult to sit in someone's shoes, right, to see the world from their eyes. But the more we can develop that skill, the better we can design, the more successful we can be. You have to have empathy with the people you manage, right, to help build a world-class team. You have to have empathy with your senior management to understand strategy and see the world from their eyes. Critical lesson that I'm still trying to master myself, and I cannot overemphasize that. So now we'll jump forward to 1992. It gets a little interesting. That was not interesting, by the way. Was anyone not alive in 1992? The love of God, if you are, you do have to get out. So I've gone to UT, graduated with a computer science degree. I got a job at IBM. I think they were paying me $32,000. I thought I was on top of the world. Very, very proud of my job at IBM with my family and everything else. I was an only child, and my cousin was also an only child. We had a very small family, so my cousin and I were very close. And she marries a guy. Now I think in 1992, what was I, 22, 23, something like that. My cousin's like 21. She marries a guy who is very, very, very wealthy, right? He's in his 20s. He's got a Ferrari, he had a Porsche 911 Turbo, he had a plane, a lot of $40,000 watches. My $32,000 job was not looking so impressive anymore, you know? Family gatherings just kind of sucked at that point. Like, yeah, I got a raise, $500. So one Thanksgiving, Sammy, his name was Sammy, he approaches me and he says, "Russ, are you really happy at IBM, you know?" And I was like, "Well, you know, I'm happy. I don't know if it's my full dream, but I'm happy." He said, "Well, I just bought a wheel company." See if this clicker goes. A wheel company in Mexico. The brand is Lugaro. And I'm manufacturing wheels and I'm selling in Europe, but I want to sell in the US. And would you partner with me and we'll open up a distributorship in Austin, Texas, right, to sell to the US. Now I'm looking at his watches and I'm looking at his cars and I see dollar signs and I'm like, yeah, let's sell wheels, you know? God. So I go to my boss at IBM and I tell him, I think he almost fell out of his chair laughing, right? And sure, I'm going to fail. And I leave. Sammy writes a check for about $25,000 to $30,000 so I can literally put a down payment on some warehouse space, you know, do all the legal documentation to incorporate a small company. We called it Samrus, Sammy and Russ, Samrus. And then he sent a shipment of about $250,000 worth of these wheels. A set of those wheels was about $4,000 to $5,000. And so I fill this warehouse. It's got 3 offices in front of it. And I sit down, and then it like occurs to me, I'm like, okay, what do I do now? Like, I've got wheels, you know, and I don't even know what I'm doing, you know. And so I call Sammy, and I go, "Sammy, so what now?" And he says, "Sell wheels." And I'm like, "Sell wheels? Like, how do I sell wheels?" And he goes, "Well, just, you know, call Mercedes, call Porsche, call the better dealerships. They'll buy the wheels, you know." So I call them, they hang up on me. Call another one, hangs up on me. So I decide that I have to meet them in person. So I take a couple of sets of these wheels and I put them in the back of my Jeep, my broken down Jeep, and I drive into a Mercedes dealership. Now here's this guy who's like 23 in a Jeep carrying $5,000 wheels in the Mercedes dealership. They almost called the police, right? That did not work. So long story short, the whole thing fell apart. It did not go anywhere. Our partnership dissolved. But I had put everything in my name. So the lease, the 5-year lease on the space for the warehouse, the credit card system, which was a 5-year lease, all these things were in my name, and I had a lot of debt. And I think actually at the time I had about $150 in my checking account. I had no way of even paying my apartment rent, right? I called my mom. I asked her for $1,000 just so I could buy food and literally make my rent payment. And then I decided I had two options. One option is I could go back to IBM and beg for my job back. But my old boss was kind of a douchebag. I didn't want to do that. So So I thought I could try to make something happen, and the only thing I knew how to do was software. So I started looking for any kind of gathering, networking, mixer, anything I could, and I found one, and I went to it, and I met a mid-level sales guy from Southwestern Bell, and he says, what do you do? And I said, well, I have a software company. He's like, really? And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, do you know anything about call centers? And I was like, yeah, I do. I know a lot about call centers, And he goes, that's phenomenal. And he goes, because I'm working on a deal with JCPenney's to build the intelligent call center. It's called ICC. It's a project. It's a multi-million-dollar project. And I'm looking for a subcontractor that can help us actually develop the software. Do you have a lot of developers that know about call center? Because this is a pretty big project. And I'm like, I've got 7 guys back in my office who code for call centers all day long. That's actually our specialty, right? I literally said that. And the guy goes, this is unfucking believable. This is exactly what I was looking for. And he's like, I tell you what, in a week, we're going to go to meet with JCPenney's. I want you to come with me. And if we close the deal, the contract's yours. So I'm like, done. So I leave the networking event and I make a beeline to Barnes & Noble. Because back then the web wasn't so big, right? I used to go to Barnes & Noble for information. So I went to Barnes & Noble and I found every book I could on telecom and call centers. And I started reading them. And I go to the meeting. And long story short, we sold that deal. And I was awarded a $1.4 million contract. And I went and convinced 6 developers to join my startup, right? And I gave them those same books. And thank God they were smart, because we actually delivered on time, budget, and the customer, JCPenney's, was so happy that these call center experts had come and done this that Southwestern Bell made us a preferred partner, right? And at that point, we were getting calls every single day from Southwestern Bell on different projects, because once we got into the system as a preferred partner, we were the go-to company. So my takeaway from this is not lying, if you think that's what my takeaway was. Salesmanship. You have to know how to sell, right? We all have to sell in some capacity. There's no 2 ways about it. You have to understand what's in it for them, what's in it for engineering when we work with engineering, what's in it for product management, if you want to influence anybody. I find that there are a lot of cases where there is no single design or workflow that works for a particular project. There's sometimes multiple. In other words, there's some subjectivity to it, right? I mean, you could do 4 or 5 in number of workflows that might satisfy all your constraints and your requirements and would work. And in cases like that, a lot of it comes down to sales, if you really want to get your designs implemented. The other is tenacity. That first phrase is something that I've been saying to myself since I was probably 16 years old, stuck in that chili truck, is if you want something bad enough, you'll find a way. I firmly believe this. If you ever, I'm sure you've had that experience where you go to engineering and you say, can you build this design? And they're like, oh, I don't know, it's going to take like 3 months. It's really complicated, And then next weekend they come back and say, look what I built over the weekend. It's something I came up with, We had a situation recently at Microsoft where, I probably shouldn't have said at Microsoft, but anyway, where one of our designs from the studio I run, one of the designers went to development to try to get a design built, and development said it's going to take 3 months. And I happen to have a front-end engineering team in my studio, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And I went to one of them and I said, how long would it take to build this? And he's like, I don't know, let me take a look at it. And he came back the next morning, he had built it. And it's true, it's a true story. It's not a fabricated story. He really had built it. And so I went to the designer and I said, look, we got it built. He's like, how'd you do that? And I'm like, we found a way, right? Don't succumb to the first obstacle, Don't just say, oh, the standards committee said we can't do that. Oh, the developer said it was too hard. I mean, go for it, Try to make it happen, right? There are ways. I find ways around things all the time. That's actually probably one of my biggest strengths, actually. But it really can serve you well. Okay. So now we're moving to 1993. Alvy. Weird name, I know. But I wasn't happy with that consulting company. And in hindsight, I feel like very stupid for that, because I could have grown that into something really big. But the reason I wasn't happy is I really wanted to have a product company. I wanted to build products that people used and loved and I would be really proud of. That was really my passion, I guess. And the company I had built was consulting and services, and it's just stupid. But anyway, I wasn't content. So I took what we learned in doing the call center work, and I came up with an idea for a product. And the idea was that in these call centers, at least at that time, I don't know about today, you had a lot of complicated products. You had an automatic call distribution system, you had an interactive voice response system, you had PBXs, you had auto dialers. None of them talked. They spit out data and reports, and if you know anything about call centers, they're all about efficiency, right? So we came up with a product, I came up with a product that would consolidate, would bring all the data from these different types of devices into one central database, produce these really nice, beautiful reports. It was all consolidated, and we'd even go a step further and start correlating that data, right, to give you additional insights into how to improve the operations of the call center. That was the idea. That was our logo. I had to put it up because every time I see it, I laugh. I found it. It kind of looks almost like a cigar wrapper to me. I don't know why, but anyway. So I raised $2 million off that idea. I think I was 25 at this point. That was a lot of money, and I was excited. I was really excited. I think I did a little dance. And as part of raising that money, some of the investors came on my board. I formed a board of directors for the company. And I'd put together a business plan on what we would require to get to significant revenue and eventually profitability, as you always have to do in startups. And that was going to require $12 million. That's what my best business plan estimate gave me. And the board quickly arrived at the conclusion that to really raise that $12 million, we were going to need some gray hair, right? I was 25 years old, and I get it. I mean, if it's your money, you want to reduce risk, right? You want to go with a known factor, you want to go with experience. That makes sense. And so I accepted that. The truth is I didn't like it, because this was my baby. I really felt strongly about it. It just rubbed me wrong, but I wanted the company to succeed so badly that I accepted it, right? I was like, okay, all right, if that's what it's going to take. The problem is that all the people that they were bringing to the table as CEO were slimy. I mean, like bad, really bad. Hopefully none of them are in the room, but really, really bad. And I just kept bending over. I can't believe I just said that. I kept, that just slipped out. I kept, let's say I kept compromising my values. And because I was hell-bent on making the company work, that's what I was focused on. And we failed. We failed to raise the money despite doing all that, and we had to shut it down. I am much less upset about shutting down the company than I am about compromising my values doing it, right? I would have rather had kept my integrity and done what I thought was right and failed than not do what I thought was right and still fail, right? That's where I really, really felt like I failed. And so my takeaway from that experience was integrity, Maintain your values, do not compromise them, no matter what. Trust me, you will hate yourself. Don't do it because you think it's what you've got to do to succeed. It won't work. It won't work. And interestingly enough, I find that a lot of people actually don't really do the work to determine what their values are. it can be hard. I mean, if I ask one of you what your values are, you might say, honesty, hard work, There's a lot of things that we know we should do. They're the right thing to do. That doesn't mean that they're really your core values, the things that really speak to you. And a CEO once gave me the advice, and he said, if you're trying to figure out what's really important to you, what your passion is, what you really admire, look for somebody that you do admire and try to figure out what characteristics about them you admire, and that can give you some linkage to what your true values are. If you admire Gandhi, what is it about Gandhi that really speaks to you deep down? I think it's a worthy exercise, but I would say integrity is you can't let go of it. So the company had shut down. I took a rebound job as vice president of engineering at a company called Hyperformix in Austin. And in the process of that job, I was trying to redesign and rebuild their product suite, and I arranged a meeting with the CEO of NetQoS. NetQoS is a small 30-person startup. I really didn't know much about them, but I heard that they were really good about the way they collected data on complex networks. So I met with the CEO, we had lunch, and about 30 minutes in, he said, I don't want to talk about a partnership anymore. I want to talk about you coming to work for me. And we just hit it off, right? And the most interesting thing about what came out of that conversation was he zeroed in on what I really wanted to do. I really have to give him credit for that. He said, you've been a CEO, you've startups, you're a vice president of engineering right now. He said, but every time you talk, when you get excited, you talk about design. You talk about designing the product. When you were CEO of your startups, you designed the products. When you were as vice president of engineering, you're showing me workflows and you're designing products. He said, what I need is somebody to come in and make our products easier to use. He said, we've got some of the best technology, but if we're ever going to succeed, we need to make our products easy to use and we need people to love them. Now, this was 2005. This was a 30-person startup led by a former engineer. That's some pretty good insight from him to start to see that trend and that need at that point. So he convinced me to come on as head of product design for NetQoS, and we went from 30 people to 300 people. I had a team of about 4 designers. We were awarded best in class for customer satisfaction. I think we were on Inc.'s fastest growing privately held companies. Joel, the CEO, my boss, got Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year, and we sold for $200 million to CA Technologies. Ka-ching. That was a good one, right? That really succeeded. And a lot of our success was attributed to great design. Customers loved NetQoS's products. I think you can actually Google it today and find articles about how much they loved our products. We really had a great run there and a great success and a focus on design from the top down, from the CEO down. I learned a lot of things at NetQoS, but the things I would key in on are first and foremost accountability. When I became vice president of design, Joel came to me and he said, once you're a leader, once you lead anything, there are no excuses, right? He said, you can't come to me and say, oh, the design of the product's bad because engineering wouldn't build what you wanted, or the design's bad because you couldn't get product management to agree, or whatever. He said, you own design. The market will judge you. People outside the company will judge you. If our products suck and you're the head of design, people are going to infer that you suck. So own it, fix it, right? No excuses. And I actually find accountability very empowering. We have very strong accountability at Microsoft, and I was very happy to learn that because it's a strange thing, but for me,
I'm sorry, it's the phone with the couch.
for me, being told I'm accountable makes it very simple for me to come up with a plan and come back and say what it's going to take to achieve that plan. If you're going to hold me accountable for the design of the product, you're going to tell me that it's my fault whether or not this product is good or not. Well, here's what it's going to take to get it there, and I've got to have it. And if I can't have it, then we have to change what we're trying to achieve, right? But it makes it much more concrete, objective, and empowering. The other thing was team. Being an entrepreneur, you tend to be kind of self-motivated, self-driven. I really learned the value of team at NetQOS and the value of people. Joel interviewed every single person that we hired at NetQOS as CEO. He believed very strong in culture, hiring for culture. I think that is critical. I focus a lot on culture. I focus a lot on potential. I see a lot of people make the mistake of just going down a checklist. Well, do they know C#? Have they ever used this? Have they ever used that? You know, okay. If not, no, they're no good. I think you need to look deeper, right? Potential is much more important to me than experience. Now, experience is important in a lot of cases, and it does depend on the job. I am often sought out for my experience, but potential is very powerful. I took that line from Warren Buffett. You know, I always, whenever I interview anybody, I think of three things. Can they do the job? Do they want to do the job? I mean, do they really want to do the job, right? Not do they want the money. Do they want to do the job? Are they excited? And can I work with them? I don't know if you've heard of this or seen this, but I think it's fabulous. You know, I will not hire a brilliant jerk. I can tell you that right now. There's not enough time. We're all going to die. Hate to tell you. I don't want to be in a room full of brilliant jerks 10 hours a day, right? You know, I've been fortunate enough to meet a lot of people. I've been in a meeting with a billionaire. I've been in meetings with some of the smartest people I've ever met. And I find that some of the richest and some of the smartest are often some of the most humble, right? There's really no excuse for being a dickhead. Okay, so flash forward. CA Technologies, we've been acquired. A lot of people ask me why I joined CA, because we got acquired and we had a cash out. I had been mainly in startups for over a decade, and I saw CA not as the evil giant, but as an opportunity to see what I could do in a large company. That's really the truth. And so I joined CA. I started as VP of User Experience. They made me an offer as VP because, again, of the perception that our products were so well designed, and that's why they acquired us. And shortly into my stint at CA, I recognized that CA had a checkered past, and it was built by acquiring a lot of companies and a lot of products and then repackaging those products and reselling them, right? They didn't do a lot of in-house innovation or development. So they had, any given set of products looked nothing like the rest of the products. There was no consistency. It was just it was a mess. And the new CEO at the time was trying to drive for a more cohesive experience, reposition CA as more of an innovation company. But the investment it would require to change all those interfaces or to modernize them or to even rethink them is just, it's not viable, right? So we came up with an idea. I don't know if you'll agree that it was a good idea or not, but we came up with the idea of building this web portal-like product that was very modern, had a very nice design that would work as kind of a meta surface for these other products. And the products could then interact with the web portal through APIs. So you could expose the functionality of an underlying product that was old and dated through this modern interface on the web, right? We came up with that within my team. We built a prototype, and we started showing it to the company, and it took off. And they formed a business unit to actually drive it. It was codenamed Panther, became the CA platform, and it resulted in my promotion to SVP. So all was going great. However, there was a quick shift. And in the 3 or so years that I was at CA, there were 3 CEOs. I had 9 bosses. Has anyone in the room had 9 bosses in 3 years? We're getting drinks later. A couple of them were phenomenal, literally phenomenal, and I keep in touch with them. A couple of them were the worst I have ever worked for, literally the worst. And so it was very much like this. And what I took away from that experience was the need for top-down support, right? Might be a better word for this, but what I'm really trying to say is, if you don't have that sponsorship for UX, for design from the top, you're in trouble. Flat out. I mean, I've seen it play out time and time again. And I mean alignment, right? I don't mean lip service. I mean willingness to invest, and invest in the type of design that you're talking about. You know, I was in a situation where my boss was talking to me about innovative design. Oh, you've got to push the envelope. You've got to go blue sky. You've got to really innovate. I had the chance to meet with his boss, and his boss was saying, you know, we really need to be practical. We need to be incremental. We want to make small changes. We don't want to get too clever, you know? And I'm like, holy shit, that's, you know, that's here and here, right? And that's why when I go to my boss, I can never hire. I can never get the right number of people. I can never get the right investments. So you've got to ensure that that alignment's correct. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. It just has to be aligned, right? You have to understand that you've got backing from the top. So now IBM. So after coming to the realization that things were just not going to work at CA, I started looking at other options. And I had the paperwork on my desk to co-found another startup with Joel, former CEO of NetQS. He was now on his third. And I was really thinking about it, and I went to South by Southwest in Austin, and I went to a mixer, and I happened to run into, well, actually I went to the mixer, and I was standing in the bar holding a drink, and this man walks up next to me and stands next to me holding a drink, and we start talking, and it's Phil Gilbert. I don't know if you've heard of Phil Gilbert. Phil Gilbert's currently the GM of design for IBM. We had a very similar story, turns out. Phil was a co-founder of Lombardi Software in Austin, and IBM acquired Lombardi. And Phil came in as an executive, just like I had with CA. However, Phil had a much more positive outcome. IBM had appointed Ginny Romedy as the new CEO, and Ginny's message to the company was, we've been asleep at the wheel, right? There's a lot of areas we need to invest in. IBM needs to get back in the limelight. One of those areas is design. And Phil happened to be in her line of sight, and she said, Phil, you're the new GM of design, make it happen, right? So Phil gets this mandate to hire 1,200 user experience professionals into IBM. 1,200. And drive design thinking at IBM. IBM has roughly about 420,000 employees. It's second only to Walmart in the number of people that work for the company in the US. And so he turns to me and he says, I've got a big problem. And I'm like, yeah? And he goes, well, it depends on how you look at it. It's a big opportunity or a big problem. He said, I've got to drive design thinking at IBM. I'm trying to build out my executive team. Would you want to help me out? And I love Phil. And we hit it off right away. And I decided to join IBM. And I came on board to IBM for two things, two roles. One was to create a mobile innovation lab. There was none, so there was zero. And the other was to be one of IBM's first, they were calling them design executives, true design executives. So I started, when I started there were zero people in the lab. Within about 5-6 months we had 32 designers and engineers. Over a 10-month period we delivered 10 apps to the market. We did some really cool stuff. We worked on apps for the World Cup, for the US Open. We did apps to help with transportation for the city of Austin, for conferences, all sorts of we got to work on the cool stuff. It was one of the funnest gigs I've ever had. And then I was also working very much with IBM on IBM's system of design thinking. I don't know if any of you have run across this either, but basically what we did is we took standard design, textbook design thinking, and we started adding on to it what we felt was required for design thinking to work in a large enterprise. So we started we added three things basically: HILs, which are high-level user-centric goals; playbacks, which are a series of meetings that you have to ensure collaboration and alignment, and sponsor users, the involvement of users throughout that actually sponsor the project. Very successful with this system. We taught this to all new designers coming into the company. We taught this to executives. We taught this to product management. You could go to IBM right now and go to any of the corporate vice presidents and say, what are your hills? And he'll tell you what the hills are. It was very successful. And in fact, IBM Services has now taken this system and they're selling it to companies. They're selling consulting on how to do design thinking correctly, right? And from what I've last heard, that there was literally they have so many clients backed up they can't even get to them all. So the things I learned in my time at IBM, among many things, one was governance. I used to hate that word. I used to think it was the evil word. In my experience, it's much easier to come up with a process, to define a process that's pretty good, than to actually keep it going. Right? I can't tell you how many times I've come up with a process for different teams I've managed, and you know what happens is everybody gets on board and it's all going great, but then it kind of just starts to trickle off, right? And people start breaking the rules and they don't do it. You've got to have governance for your process. The other thing is collaboration. Again, I'm an only child. Collaboration's hard for me. It's something I have to remind myself of all the time. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten emails from executives saying, why the hell didn't you let me know we're going to do that, right? You know, why the hell didn't you call me up or clue me in? And I'm trying to get better at that. I've realized the importance of it, and I'm trying to make myself collaborate. I will say collaboration does not mean consensus, right? And I would also say that collaboration requires well-defined roles and responsibilities. You cannot collaborate with a group of people unless everybody understands what their different authority is, decision-making power, and such. I had to throw this in. I didn't want to do any screenshots. I know it's a design conference, but you know, we did such cool stuff in the Mobile Innovation Lab. So, a year into this, things are going really great. I'm up for a big vice president role at IBM. They've already told me they're going to announce it, and I get a call from Microsoft. And the call was very flattering. They wanted me to consider a role at Microsoft as head of design, and I told them I'm flattered, but you know, I've been in Austin for 30 years, as we mentioned. Not really interested in leaving, and by the way, things are going really good for me, and they said, let's just keep talking. And I like to imagine the way it all happened was, you know, I was in like a Western saloon, and we were sliding a little piece of paper back and forth and kind of looking at it and then sliding it back. I don't know why, but anyway, I'm weird like that. Long story short, the paper came back, and I went, okay. So I have just joined Microsoft. This is our new design studio that we're building at Microsoft, and I'm very proud of what we've built up. From January when I joined, very recently, we've gone from about 7 to about 38 staff. I've got some of the best designers I've ever worked with on the team. I break the studio up into those chunks: creative, prototyping, research, and content development. And I'll even show you the breakdowns right now that we have. I will not build a design studio without some front-end development in it, without a prototyping function in it. And there's multiple reasons. One is that if we don't have, as a design studio, the capability to build out some of our designs, I feel crippled. I feel like we're so dependent on engineering that I can't really get things done. And I have used that prototyping function strategically and tactically so many times that it's critical. They help bridge the gap with engineering. They help get engineering's respect. Oh, the studio has engineers, you know? That's kind of cool. It turns out, right now, right this hour, I've got 2 of the prototypers in my studio checking in code to our product that's about to go GA. So we've even gone as far as not only just helping to build prototypes and helping to bridge the gap, but actually contributing to the source code and the code base that's going to go out the door. And it works. It works. It empowers design, right? I also believe that we leverage and rely heavily on prototyping as the spec. People don't like to read documentation. Some documentation is required. You have to have some. But the more we can prototype and use that as an example of what we're trying to build, the better off we are, right? And even though there are many schools of thought around prototyping, and it's almost like a religious debate, I know a lot of people believe that prototypes should be throwaway. I have found in practice that a lot of what we prototype, when we use the right tools and the right foundation of prototype, we can reuse, we can hand off to development, they can harden it, they can get something out of it. So that really helps. I've gotten the team to adopt the concept of hills. We're having a senior leadership team offsite when I get back, starting on Sunday, I believe. And we're going to talk about our hills for the next semester. And probably the biggest thing is that we will not make an engineering investment without design sign-off. So we have to have a design phase before any engineering commitment within the business unit, and that's a new thing as well. PM owns the what, design owns the how, engineering makes it real. This is our simple 100,000-foot view of our process, but basically plan, design, build, right? At the end of design is where we make that engineering investment. We specify hills in a release plan and a planning phase. PM drives that. Now, notice that design is involved in every piece, and that was really critical up front. When I came in, we had PM kind of disappearing, coming back and saying, we figured out what we're going to do for the next release, right? And I said, well, can we have some input into that? Because design's not decoration, right? And so we've now gotten involved in the actual planning process for the product lifecycle. Oh, another thing I should mention is that the way we did it within the BI organization at Microsoft, design is at the same level as PM and engineering. So I head up design, there's a head of engineering, and there's a head of PM. And we did that on purpose to create equal ground. But yes, we are involved in the planning session. We drive the design phase, and we focus on prototypes and high-level design. And then in the build phase, of course, we get down into the details, and we use an agile iterative process. And we're refining that now. We've been doing that since January, roughly, when I joined, maybe February. It's been working really well, and we're advancing that. These are the breakdowns in the team, if you're interested. Right now, I pulled the numbers for another report I was doing, and that's roughly, creative. On the left are the roles within the studio. On the right is design relative to the other parts of the organization. I'd like to see design and PM flipped, at the very least, but we're working on that. This is our new branding website. So I was allowed to rebrand Power BI. It kind of freaked out Microsoft at first. I came in and did a new logo, new color, and all of a sudden Microsoft's brand police descended upon me and said, who the hell are you? What are you doing? And then I had to get legal involved. Legal did a 1-month study of that logo in the upper left. And they found some logo in Scandinavia for a restaurant, and they're like, they could come after us, and I'm like, they're like, we'll let you do it, but you have to sign this thing saying that if they come after us, you'll abandon the logo. I'm like, if that restaurant in Scandinavia comes after us, I will abandon that logo. They can have it. And it's not even that close, but legal. But yeah, we got to establish a unique identity for Power BI, which is really neat. But we aren't trying to get away from Microsoft. You don't see it here, but there's actually a lot of co-branding with Microsoft. We want people to know we are a Microsoft unit, right, a Microsoft product. but we also want to have some identity in the use of product icons. So that's really it. So these are kind of the key lessons I've learned from a lot of these experiences, and I'm by no means an expert on any one of them, but I try to remind myself of the importance of each one, and I assure you that they are all very important to our success and very important in the work we do in design. You can find me there. I will point out one thing. So I moved to Seattle in January, and my name is Russell Wilson. And so I was wondering why everyone smiles at me, right? I get off the plane and I go to the Avis counter, and all the women they're like lined up, you know, and I walk up and they're looking beyond me, you know, and I'm like, I'm Russell Wilson, and oh my, what, you know, and I'm like this disappointment over and over again. The guy that delivered our cars to our house, like, brought his wife with him. And he's like, well, I figured it could have been, you know, and I'm like, so I told everyone I'm the original. The other cool thing is that I do have that handle, and I should show you guys some of the tweets I get sometime. Wow, yeah, I really want to start tweeting back, you know, and just kind of playing the role, you know, like, yeah, I'm going to kill it Sunday, you know, or anyway, I don't know. But that's it. I guess we can open up for Q&A, or do you have any questions? No hecklers, please.
Any questions?
Hi there. I'm really curious about the way that you participate in defining the concept of hills, and also how you've been able to bring the UX strategy into your design thinking, because I think that's an area that's frustrating a lot of people now, that they're on the design side but they're trying to influence the overall product strategy.
So as part of having that equal footing with PM, engineering, and design, I'm involved in every senior leadership team meeting, every planning offsite by default. So that helps. The way we've organized the structure of the business unit kind of lends itself to that and makes sure that I'm not out of the loop, right? The CVP, I report to a corporate vice president at Microsoft, and he has made it clear to the organization as well, that top-down support, that we're going to be design-led, right? He tells that to PM all the time. And I've developed a very good relationship with the head of PM, who's my peer, and the head of engineering, and they're on board as well. So the advantage I have is the support of all this leadership to really make it happen and to push that down. You know, we had a situation this past week where engineering was PM was coming to engineering and saying, you know, hey, just change this, just move that. And one of the architects sends an email to the entire organization saying, you know, people, we're design-led. We're not going to listen to PMs. We're going to listen to design. So you make sure design signs off, or we're not going to change it. Freaked out PM, right? I mean, like PM, like, I get all these emails like, why the hell is he sending this email to the whole organization? Why didn't that come from the leadership team? But that's how far it's gone down, right? That was actually a good sign. And so we do have that top-level support. And when we do these planning sessions, we work on strategy. And you know, James, who's our CVP, is essentially the CEO of the unit, right? We're all sitting in the room together. And I can sit there and say, we've got to improve the experience. We've got problems with usability. We've got users complaining about this. We really think this feature is very important. I have that input into that as we define those hills. So, you know, and that's what I mean by, you know, if I were to look for another role after this, I would really look for a role where there was that kind of support, that leadership in place to make sure that I was empowered to succeed in design. That answer your question?
You mentioned that during the build phase you used an agile process, but that design had to sign off before development had any kind of investment.
Yep.
So
How's
you're
that work?
agile during build, but what's the process before that? Sounds almost waterfall or not?
So I firmly believe that we misinterpret Agile quite a bit as this jump in and go without any planning. You can't drop troops onto a field and just say, kill people, just go for it, I mean, you've got to have some direction to give people. And what we try to do in the planning and design phase is we try to set that direction. We're not trying to design out everything, but we're trying to design the high-level design, the high-level workflows, enough to show the intent of the product, to kind of set the stage, and to really communicate enough that we can give some sign-off as to, yeah, that makes sense. That's really what we want to build here. And then we do work out a lot of details in that iterative build phase. But we're trying to get the high-level stuff done, establish those hills so that people know where we're headed, what the direction is, and then we'll work out the details as we go, right? We'll make changes as we go, designs involved throughout that whole process. But we have to have that phase up front. I don't know how else you do it. I've tried to do it otherwise, and it's just a mess. Yeah.
Any other questions?
In the planning phase, I saw that you incorporate about 8% of research into your design studio. So where does research come in the planning phase? Because you have PMs working with the design studio, but specifically for research, how do they work into that phase?
So research, we have research doing a lot of studies on our products, on our designs, on our builds, as well as our prototypes. They come back and they create these research reports, and we feed those directly into the senior leadership team. And it's been really valuable. It elevates research within the organization as something that's very important. We had so Microsoft is big on telemetry, right? Everything's got telemetry in it. I've probably got telemetry on me. I don't even know it that they put on me, right? But everything's got telemetry. And I noticed that a lot of PMs were interpreting this telemetry, and it scared me because they're not the right people to interpret it. They'd kind of read a few things. Oh, hey, yeah, we have to change that, obviously. That's got to be green, So I pushed my design research team into that, as well as other activities, and then we started showing results of what the research team could do with real quantitative analysis, right? And we started producing these really nice reports and feeding those into the senior leadership team, and the senior leadership team quickly made the conclusion that we've got to have more and more of this. We've got to involve more of design research. And so now they are very involved in planning. In fact, when we have our leadership team offsite next week, we're going to take 2 reports from my design research team as part of our packet of information to consider when we do our planning.
Thank you. Your presentation was amazing, very inspiring. Quick question. So your team had...
So I'm not one of the sucky ones that they mentioned. When they say that, I'm like, oh, God. I'm going to be written off.
So the question was around your team. You had design, you had product, and you also had to think about the business. How do you find the right balance between user needs, business needs, and, of course, your product needs?
Oh, good God. Yeah. It's hard. There's no set recipe for that, right? You do have to look at those, and I tend to, I admit I tend to layer those a little bit, right? I as the head of the studio, I tend to focus a little more on the business needs. I have some of my direct reports that focus a little more on the user needs. We kind of divide and conquer a little bit, but of course you have to consider them all, right? They're all equally important, and it's very important to understand. Design teams can run amok in a way, right? They have to really align the type of design work they're doing, whether it's innovative or it's incremental, lipstick on the pig, whatever it may be, but it's got to align to the business strategy. And so I make it very clear to my team, and I'm very transparent on what our strategy is, how it's shifting, where we're going. You know, we have a huge emphasis on quality right now at Microsoft. There's a big emphasis on that. And so how does that impact or affect what we do in design? It's actually a good thing, right? Because what we're really saying at very high levels within Microsoft is that instead of building a lot of new features, we need to make sure that the existing features are done correctly. But that helps inform us as to, okay, so we need to take a good look at, you know, how could we improve the product versus how are we going to design a new feature. So it's really more about just communicating to the team, making sure they have all the right information and the right tools to make the right decisions and do good design. Yeah.
Just a quick question to follow up on the gentleman's question there regarding researchers in your team. Do you have researchers that get ahead of the design and are doing kind of more formative, strategical research in your group?
Yes. Yes, we do. And in fact, so we're going through, Microsoft goes through, its fiscal year is not aligned to a calendar year. So the end of our fiscal year is literally the end of this month. And we're doing all our budgets right now. And so I asked my head of design research to come back with a budget of what he'd like to do this next year. When I saw the number, I almost fell out of my chair. I was like, oh my God, you know. And I mean, he had like 20 things he wants to do, and a lot of them were around formative research and where we could take the product. And I approved 3 or 4 of them where we're going to, you know, really look at how can we get ahead of the product? How can we really use insights to do better design for the product? So yeah, we definitely do that.
You were successful in changing IBM's design, and so I was wondering, have you kept that same process when you moved to Microsoft, or have you changed the process in any way?
I am. I'm using a lot of the same process at Microsoft. You know, I spoke to IBM, and a lot of IBM's design thinking is considered in the public domain. So you can reuse it, you can, and so I am using. There is one proprietary portion that has to deal with customers that you can't use. But yeah, it's on the public domain, so I am trying to bring a lot of that, the concept of hills, the concept of sponsor users, playbacks. And you know, I tell my team it's all about baby steps, right? You know, I just want to see a little bit of improvement over time. You know, we've got them using hills. Great. You may not use hills correctly all the time. Hills are supposed to be user-centric goals, right? And I'll see hills written as features. Okay, all right. But at least they're using the term hill, and we'll kind of improve it over time. So I do see the process taking root. And in fact, our CVP talks in terms of hills now at Microsoft. And he's sharing that with Scott Guthrie, who's an EVP. Yeah, we're making progress there.
You mentioned that your team deliver prototype as a spec. So what kind of tools do they use, and is it really high fidelity prototype?
It depends. So several of the designers on the team use tools like Axure. Some even use Keynote, another kind of, you know, balsamic. They'll do whatever they can just with hyperlinks and, you know, to kind of mock up an interface, which is fine. But the formal prototyping team actually uses the same code base as engineering. And that's why we can transfer over some of that stuff. So they'll be using JavaScript, you know, they'll be using, you know, the same back-end databases and libraries and stuff like that. Yeah. Oh, and as far as fidelity, early on, we do low fidelity so that we can do it faster. I have found that when it comes to selling, I've got to go high fidelity because most people just can't envision what you're talking about. So we go a little more high fidelity and if we're trying to really win someone over.
How did you get design as an equal to PM and engineering? Did you ask for that on coming in as a requirement, or, I mean, did you influence that, or did it come from the leadership?
No, I told him I wouldn't take the job without it.
So what can the rest of us do?
Well, I mean, you know, again, there are some scenarios that are better than others. Design wasn't an equal at IBM, but it was rising. And the work we did at IBM was phenomenal, But from what I saw, my experience, we've got to be at an equal footing. We've got to get there. Eventually, I think it will be, right, everywhere. But, it's just so much easier to accomplish what you want to accomplish, right? You're not asking for permission anymore, Design is hard. I remember when, I think it was at NetQoS, the CTO said, "You've got the worst job in the company," your job sucks. And you're begging to get designs implemented. You're fighting. People are always complaining. Some of the stuff you do is subjective, so you wind up in rooms where people are like, I just don't like it. It's a hard job we have, and having that equal footing is really important. As far as getting there, I don't know. Keep delivering great outcomes, right? Keep showing them what's possible with great design, and keep trying to get that up to the highest levels, right? So that the executives are seeing it. The truth is, some businesses need it more than others. That's the reality. There are some products out there that don't have to be beautiful, that don't have to be well designed to be successful, right? Or as well designed, or as we'd like. So it kind of depends on the objectives of the business and the strategy and everything else. But, if you truly believe that design is critical at your company and it's critical to the future success of the company, I would be an advocate for that and try to get that message up to the CEO. I would.
Oh, we have one all the way in the back.
Forward.
So we only have time for one more question, and I've got someone back here.
Thank you. Thank you. My question is, when you're collaborating with your team, you mentioned everyone understanding their decision-making power. And I just was curious how you define roles and empower team members without making individuals feel that they don't have a final say. How do you find that balance, and how do you make people feel like they can weigh in, but certain people are making that call?
Well, I think the important thing is that you have to remove the confusion, right? I worked with a guy at CA. He was our chief development officer, and he was a phenomenal process guy. He was an old systems guy, basically. And his greatest strength was process, and I remember what he would do. We would walk in, we're keying up a new project. Everyone would walk in the room, and he'd go around the table and talk about everybody's role, everybody's authority and responsibility before anything started. And I loved it, because there were no questions after that, right? You can take it or you can leave it. This person has decision authority over this. This person has decision authority over that. End of story, right? I see more problems and more confusion when that isn't clearly spelled out. When you have PM thinking that they can change a workflow without consulting design, or you have design thinking that they can change a workflow without letting PM know at least, right? When you have engineers who decide they don't like that color, so they just change it, I think, and of course, I keep using color as the example, and it's such a trivial example, but you get it. So yeah, for me, it's more about, I would rather, my boss at NetQoS, Joel told me one time that the next best answer after yes is no. I would rather know what it is than be wondering. So tell me who has the authority, tell me who has the responsibility, tell me what the roles are, and we can work with that, right? If you tell me it's actually his decision, not mine, fine, I can work with that. I get it, his decision. But I don't want to be confused. That's the bigger problem.
Russ, thank you so much. This was awesome. Everyone give Russ a round of applause.